suggest that somewhere along the way, our system of self-government, our regime supposed to guarantee the liberty and self-government of the people, has been hijacked. It's been subverted. It's been taken over in some respect by forces no longer responding to our people. They follow their agendas of globalism and internationalism. They cater to the interests of foreign nations and leaders. They will not listen anymore to the voice of the people who have chosen them and who, under our Republican system of self-government, they are supposed to represent. That means that the reason that we don't hear much talk anymore about the sovereignty of our people is that there are, amongst our elites and amongst our leaders now, it seems, a preponderance of forces who no longer believe that the people are or should be the sovereign people of the United States, the ones who, at the end of the day, represent the authority for the law, derived not from human power and strength or even their own numbers, but from the simple principles set forth in our great Declaration of Independence. The government must be based upon their consent in order to respect those unalienable rights that come to them by the will of Almighty God. The other purpose that brings me here today, I think, though, is very much exemplified by this issue, in the sense that over the course of the last several years, as you know, there's been a great debate over our borders. Some of us have been fighting to get a priority attached to securing those borders, to doing what's necessary to restore the control of the American people over the precincts of our own nation. And yet there have been forces in the Congress of the United States who seem more interested in making life easier for those who are violating our laws, easier for those who are seeking to exploit cheap labor, easier for those who are burdening our social system and our health system than they wish to respond to the American people. Now, I will have to say, if you were to point out to me as someone who has been a lifelong Republican, a bunch of Democrats would say, oh, they've been doing that, I wouldn't be surprised. I would probably try to get you to understand that long ago, under the influence of leftist Marxism and other ideologies, a lot of the elites in the Democrat Party abandoned their allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, abandoned their allegiance to the idea and ideals of self-government, abandoned their allegiance to the Republic. They manipulate the forms, they abide by the rules in order to gain power, and that is their only objective, not to represent the people, nor to pass on our heritage of self-government. So if you had pointed them out to me and said, well, that's what they're doing, I would say, oh, I'm not surprised at that. That's what they'll pursue. But, as it has over the course of the last couple of months become increasingly clear, that the Republican who represented the greatest disregard for this deep concern of the American people, who stood as the greatest champion of the amnesty bills and those that were indifferent to the concerns of the American people for the sovereign control of their own borders, that Republican who time and time again has sought to revive these notions against the will of our people, is now considered by the media and the process that has been presented to us as the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party. On the day that I realized that John McCain was now going to be presented to the American people as the one that everyone wearing the Republican label has to back, that's the day I had to start thinking about taking drastic reaction. This is just one issue, after all. But I think that's because they fail to understand that this issue of our sovereignty is the issue of the future of our freedom, of our liberty, of our Constitution, of our Republic itself. Now you tell me, do you think it's an accident that the self-same individual who has been in the forefront of championing the policy that essentially effaces our borders, that shows no respect for the desire of the American people to reassert their sovereign control of their own territory. Do you think it's an accident that that self-same individual was in the lead in authoring a piece of legislation that in its consequences was a death blow aimed at the political and grassroots activism of the American people? Is it an accident that the same man who ignored the requirements of sovereignty with respect to our borders is the man who ignored the prerequisites of the capacity of the people to organize and mobilize in their political life when he sponsored the McCain-Feingold bill and put those regulations that were aimed at destroying the coincidence. That's one issue over here, that's the border. And the other issue over here is McCain-Feingold. The common thread that unites them is that both represent an assault on the sovereignty of the American people. The one in its manifestation, the other in its possibility. What better way to destroy self-government than to erect a system in which you have burdened the people with such trammels that they can't get their business done? I have to be suspicious anyway of politicians who believe that it is their right and business to regulate the association of the people when it comes to political affairs. I don't see how this could possibly be. Because the people we elect to the government, they're the folks that politics exists to oversee and constrain. How can we then allow them to write the rules on the basis of which people can associate, fund, and otherwise express themselves in political life? The business of politics is not under the authority of the politicians. It must remain directly under the authority of the people, or those people will have no way to control their politics. And I find it intriguing that as you examine the way in which these various measures supposedly aimed at cleaning up our politics, and let's make a parenthesis here. This is a very interesting situation in which you have politicians who see the world so burdened by the possibility of corrupt influence among politicians that they want to take away all of the fundraising mechanisms, all of the organizing mechanisms, and so forth from the people themselves. So, corruption among the politicians results in the destruction of the right of the people to organize themselves for politics. Don't you find that a little convenient? That's like somebody lighting a fire in the backyard and then showing up at the front door with a fire extinguisher. Here, let me put that out. You're the cause of the problem. And you're telling me you're going to solve it by making it more difficult for people to oversee what you do. That doesn't make any sense. And the telltale signs of this with the provisions in the McCain-Feingold bill that were actually aimed at preventing people in an organized way from communicating to one another about the record of their representatives in the 3 weeks before an election. Somebody had probably told the authors of this bill that it's only in the last 3 weeks before an election that the American people pay attention. Therefore, if you keep the grassroots organizations from talking to them in that time, you'll get away with anything you please. Now, I can believe many things, but you're not going to get me to believe that I can trust the same individual who is trying to destroy the ability of the people to oversee abuses when that individual happens also to be one of the people in the lead in perpetuating one of the greatest of those abuses, which is the destruction of our sovereign control of our border and the unleashing and untrammeling of a wave of immigration aimed at utterly subverting, in a demographic sense, the sovereign people of the United States. This, of course, confronted me with a great crisis, brings me to a crossroads. But I guess in some ways, I'm like a lot of folks in America, it's been coming for a while, and I don't want to give the impression that it has come to this point for me where I really must look for an alternative just because of the incidents and episodes of this particular election year, though I think it is a particularly crucial one. No.